This conversation features Brett Cooper discussing the ongoing fractures within conservative politics, a so-called civil war, and its wider cultural implications. The dialogue touches on internal factionalism within the right, challenges facing younger generations regarding economic realities, evolving social dynamics, political strategies, cultural distractions, and personal reflections on motherhood and identity. Through a nuanced, candid exchange, Brett explores the tensions and transformations within conservatism, youth disillusionment, culture wars, and the complexities of navigating modern life, both publicly and privately. Brett opens with a reflection on the infighting among conservatives, emphasizing that many involved are genuinely passionate and argue in good faith. She rejects the narrative that bad actors dominate these disputes, instead viewing the conflict as a struggle between competing visions for the movement's direction. Concerns about radical elements taking excessive control, foreign policy stances, and the party's future leadership all contribute to fragmentation. The discussion highlights hypocrisy regarding free speech within the right, contrasting past conservative resistance to purity tests and cancel culture with current pressures to disavow or cancel prominent figures, such as the demand for Tucker Carlson's son to publicly condemn his father. Brett points out the inconsistent celebration of personal loyalty in some cases, like Sydney Sweeney refusing to denounce her family despite misconceptions, showing that conservatives are grappling unevenly with issues of loyalty versus ideological purity. A key underlying dynamic described is that political groups unify easily when out of power, bound by mutual opposition to an outsider group. However, once in power, as the right achieved around 2024, internal divisions surface as different factions vie for dominance and question leadership choices. This phenomenon contrasts with perceptions of the left as more fractured despite holding power, signifying that internal disputes may be a sign of engagement and scrutiny rather than weakness. Brett expresses concern about how younger generations, especially Gen Z, face severe economic challenges that affect their optimism and political engagement. Despite political promises, many young Americans see homeownership delayed until their 40s or later and struggle with student debt, job markets that favor diversity hires over white men, and overall affordability constraints. The conversation reveals a key frustration from young voters. They followed conventional advice, education, hard work, delayed gratification, but faced diminished prospects. This economic reality breeds disillusionment, a sense of betrayal, and a lowered baseline for achievement. Brett stresses that mindset still matters within these structural constraints. While the bracket of opportunity may be set by genetics and environment, individuals have agency within it to improve their situation. However, the scale of the economic barrier makes individual progress daunting. Young conservatives feel ignored when leaders like Trump dismiss affordability crises as imagined. A generational divide is evident where older political figures tout success, while younger voters question when and how meaningful economic improvements will arrive. Brett classifies current right-wing factions into several camps: establishment neoconservatives, a younger, culturally savvy pro-Israel group exemplified by figures like Ben Shapiro, a far-right camp sometimes linked to extremists like Nick Fuentes, who are anti-Israel, and a centrist group including Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk, striving to bridge divides but often criticized from both extremes. This mimicry of factionalism seen on the left complicates attempts at party unity. Megyn Kelly's navigation of this terrain, maintaining relationships across factions, is highlighted as a model of grace amid harsh purity tests. The discussion underscores that managing internal ideological diversity and personality clashes is part of the conservatism's evolution in power. Brett also notes cultural priorities differ among these groups, with some prioritizing traditional foreign policy or social issues, while others focus more on economic populism and cultural authenticity. The conversation pivots to the importance of personality in contemporary politics. Brett draws parallels between Donald Trump and New York City's Eric Adams, referred to as Mumani, emphasizing how charisma and relatability, often more than detailed policy, drive popular support. Both are entertainers who engage with voters organically, creating a sense of understanding and authenticity. This trend highlights a shift in political appeal, where connection and perceived genuineness often outweigh strict competence or policy nuance. The public craves politicians who seem real, and this reduces the appeal of stiff, overly scripted candidates like Andrew Cuomo. Brett sees this as shaping current electoral outcomes and future campaigns, especially for conservatives seeking candidates who can energize and unify diverse bases by balancing radical ideas with pragmatic messaging about economic and social well-being. Brett addresses the risk of conservatives alienating key voter groups, especially women and young people, through tone and message missteps. She argues economic concerns, affordability, housing, inflation, far outweigh pure cultural warfare for many voters today. The failure to address tangible quality of life issues risks ceding ground to left-leaning challengers who promise immediate assistance, even if unsustainable. The rise of populist outsiders within the right underscores this urgency. Effective conservative messaging, Brett suggests, should be clear, empathetic, and focused on delivering solutions rather than only opposing left-wing policies or emphasizing cultural battles. She warns that overemphasis on foreign affairs or owning the libs rhetoric risks disconnect from voters prioritizing economic survival. Brett critiques the cyclical nature of culture war outrage, describing it as a repetitive, shiny object cycle where extreme or absurd stories capture attention briefly, ignite fiery debates on both sides, and then fade only to be replaced by new controversies. This cycle consumes much of political and social discourse, distracting from deeper, longer-term issues. While mocking and calling out ridiculous behaviors is entertaining and cathartic, Brett acknowledges the danger of getting trapped in this vortex, reducing collective focus on meaningful progress. She advocates for stepping back from this endless feedback loop and prioritizing conversations with lasting impact beyond immediate viral moments. Brett and her interlocutor explore how free speech debates have become entangled with social media's cancel culture and purity demands. There is a growing tendency within conservative circles to demand ideological conformity similar to what they previously opposed on the left. This shift manifests in personal calls to denounce family members' politics or boycott speakers, reflecting a broader cultural fracturing and intolerance for dissent, even within factions. Brett contrasts this with earlier principles of open debate and warns that this internal policing may weaken the overall movement. She underscores the importance of airing ideas publicly and allowing debate to counter bad arguments rather than silencing opponents, especially in the digital age's attention economy. A surprising but related subject is the rise of advice advocating relationship boundaries that increasingly encourage breaking off contact with family or partners over ideological differences. Data from forums like Reddit show a rise in counsel favoring cutoffs and avoidance rather than communication and compromise. Brett connects this trend to broader social dynamics of polarization and loneliness, noting that while some may find empowerment in severing ties, this often leads to isolation and echo chambers. Such behaviors both reflect and reinforce culture war animosities, making social cohesion more difficult. She critiques celebrity influences who champion radical boundary setting and highlights the emotional consequences of these evolving attitudes around connection, conflict, and community. The conversation turns to body positivity and the impact of weight loss drugs like Ozempic on cultural norms. Brett observes that the widespread availability of such treatments challenges previous body positivity narratives, creating tension within those communities. She notes the complicated social dynamics where formerly celebrated body-positive figures who lose weight face accusations of betrayal, illustrating a shift in cultural identity politics tied to health and appearance. This phenomenon reflects larger cultural conflicts about authenticity, effort, and the meaning of wellness in a commercialized, image-conscious society. Brett discusses the evolving public discourse among women about relationships, marriage, and motherhood, exemplified by figures like Alex Cooper and country singer Kelsey Ballerini. Many young women, having prioritized career and independence, now confront questions about timing, fertility, and desire for family. The dialogue highlights the tension between feminist messaging, promising having it all, and the biological and emotional realities of life choices. Brett critiques messages that trigger hopelessness in young women, emphasizing the value of hope and cautions against fatalistic narratives that suggest missed opportunities or diminished value with age. The role of cultural icons, personal evolution, and shifting attitudes toward partnerships and parenting are explored as key influences on generational perspectives. Brett shares intimate reflections on her own transition into motherhood, describing the physical and emotional challenges postpartum and a dramatic recalibration of priorities. Motherhood brings vulnerability, surrender, and a newfound focus on legacy and societal betterment. She contrasts previous hyper-independence with the necessity of relying on others and reprioritizing life ambitions without abandoning professional identity. This balancing act reflects broader tensions many face between career, family, and personal fulfillment. Motherhood is framed as a profound source of meaning that reshapes motivations and deepens engagement with culture and politics. Brett talks about her experience with live shows that blend personal storytelling, humor, and current events. Live interaction with audiences provides immediate feedback and emotional connection absent in digital spaces, enriching creative fulfillment. This face-to-face engagement contrasts with the fragmented, delayed, and often depersonalized nature of online content consumption. Brett advocates for creators to incorporate real-world community building alongside digital work to sustain motivation and impact. Live performances become a corrective to the isolating tendencies of social media-driven work. The conversation explores international case studies like South Korea and Georgia to examine cultural, religious, and social interventions impacting birth rates. The discussion highlights how education, economic opportunity, cultural expectations, and media role models, e.g. K-pop stars, shape reproductive choices. Brett suggests that authentic cultural shifts and visible examples of family fulfillment, such as Taylor Swift's engagement and motherhood plans, can subtly influence societal norms and encourage positive change. Government policies alone are insufficient without accompanying cultural resonance. Finally, Brett discusses the challenges of maternity leave and postpartum recovery, emphasizing the physical and emotional demands new mothers face. She notes the inadequacy of current leave policies, especially in the U.S., and stresses the need for rest and support systems. Her personal experience uncovers the tension between a driven, go-go-go mentality and the necessity of vulnerability and healing during this period. She highlights the enduring impact of cultural narratives that idealize having it all without acknowledging the sacrifices and trade-offs inherent in parenting and career. Brett points out opportunities for conservative populism to address family support policies authentically and compassionately.